Time for the French newspapers now. Florence Villeminot here with us on the set. And golden rules. You're bringing us some gold today. A lot of the French newspapers talking about the golden rules. It's to do with the Europe's debt crisis.
Absolutely. This is actually a proposal being put forward by President Nicolas Sarkozy. And we're going to take a look at an article in Le Figaro, which is a right-leaning newspaper. And he said, basically, he wants to write a deficit balancing rule into the constitution. So this règle d'or that would force future French administrations to seek a balanced budget. Now, a similar rule exists in Germany. Now, the upper and lower houses of parliament have already voted in favor of this golden rule, but there's a next hurdle facing Nicolas Sarkozy, and that's a special combined parliamentary vote that's scheduled for this autumn, and that requires a 3/5 majority. Now, Sarkozy seems likely to lose this because the Socialist Party has already vowed to oppose it. Now, François Hollande and Martine Aubry, who are both candidates for the 2012 presidential election, have called on socialist members of parliament to vote against it. But this could play into Sarkozy's hands because in the lead up to the 2012 presidential election, he could paint the opposition as dangerous spendthrifts who are unfit to rule France in this era of debt crisis. Now, let's take a look at Libération, which is a left-leaning newspaper, and unsurprisingly, they wonder if this might be some sort of a trap. And they say that basically Sarkozy is warming up for the future presidential election, and as well as most people who've said they want to run for this election are warming up and kind of testing the waters on this issue. Now, yesterday, Sarkozy in a letter called on unity and said that it was the responsibility of MPs. It was facing history. They had to let their party politics on the side and everything. And socialists say that it's just a publicity stunt, and that if anything, Sarkozy shouldn't be handing out lessons on this issue since it was under his presidency, they say, that the budget took a nosedive.
Okay, we've got a second Sarkozy story for you. It's one of those stories a year on, and I can't believe this is a year ago. He gave a speech in the southern town of Grenoble, didn't he, where he unleashed a bit of a campaign against ethnic Roma, and thousands of them were deported as a result of it.
Absolutely. Now, it's on the cover of Libération, l'échec du tour répressif. So basically, it says that the Roma community, the failure of the harsh repression that they say that Nicolas Sarkozy unleashed against them. Now, in the editorial, it's called The Curse, and it says that politicians, it's not up to politicians to stigmatize a community, and that Sarkozy's repressive campaign against the Romas has failed. Now, it says that the whole campaign was launched to increase Sarkozy's popularity, and that Sarkozy stereotyped them and called them delinquents. But many people in the Roma community are actually French citizens and have been living in France for generations. And it's interesting to note that this campaign that Sarkozy launched drew harsh criticism, including from the European Union, who said it was contrary to the values of the European Union. Now, 1 year later, Libération says that the president is still very low in the polls, and that all this policy has brought is to weaken the Roma community.
Okay, bit of a lighter subject now. 2012 Olympics kick off in London year's time from now. Paris, of course, lost the bid to host those Olympics, but the paper's still getting excited.
Exactly. Parisians are not sore losers, it seems. Les JO à nos portes, the Olympic Games on our doorstep. Now, Le Parisien takes a look at how London is gearing up, and I must say that the Parisien is getting pretty excited about these Olympic Games, and they're expecting a lot of French people to attend. I mean, London is so close to Paris, just an hour on the plane and 2.5 hours on the train. And in fact, the Parisien points out that France is going to be a staging ground for a lot of teams. They're going to be training here, and so it says that people should go out and buy their tickets right now.
Okay, and finally, we're going to talk about some trees now. This is in the south of France, isn't it? The fate of trees.
Absolutely. Now, this is an article in Le Figaro. It concerns 42,000 trees that line the Canal du Midi. This is a very famous canal in the south of France.
It's very beautiful.
Very beautiful. And it's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, these trees are sick. They're being attacked by a fungus called Ceratopsides plantani. And so a lot of people, nature lovers, are upset because they're going to have to cut down these trees. But don't worry, they're going to replant them.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well pronounced as well, Florence. Florence Villeminot with the French newspapers here on France 24. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Revolutions never go backwards, runs a proverb, but they can hit serious speed bumps on the road to change. Just look at the Arab world about 6 months after the first of the uprisings there that forever changed the political landscape across the region. Now, in some countries, such as Tunisia and Egypt, young revolutionaries fear that transitional regimes now are dragging their feet on reform. In other countries, such as Syria and Libya, for instance, revolts are running into fierce resistance from strongmen who do not shy away from violence, anything but. Now, my guest today is Marina Ottaway. She is a senior associate in Middle East program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She has written extensively about political reconstruction, political transformation in places including Iraq, Afghanistan, the Balkans, and Africa. And she joins me today from Washington, D.C. Welcome. Thanks for being here on France 24.
Thank you for inviting me.
Marina, I'd like to start where it all began, Tunisia. 6 months later, yeah, Ben Ali's gone, but we still have deep poverty there, high unemployment, more corruption than ever. And we also are hearing reports of growing tensions between the young activists there and the Islamists, it's religion versus secular people. Is this something that worries you?
Well, yes, the tension between the Islamist parties and the secular parties is worrisome. Neither gives the other the benefit of a doubt. Both seem to think that if other parties with a different tendency would win the election, it would be a catastrophe. And I think all the fears are largely unfounded because all the evidence that's available at this point points to the fact that no party will have a majority of vote, no tendency will have a majority of the vote, and they will have to form a coalition government.
You say they'll have to form a coalition government. Are they actually communicating? Are they talking to each other?
Secular parties are talking to each other. Nobody seems to be very inclined to talk to another, which is the Islamist parties at this point. The only way they talk to each other is within this High Council for the Protection of the Goals of the Revolution, which is kind of assembly that, in the absence of an elected parliament, tries to reach the most important decisions necessary to get to the elections.
Let me ask you, let's hop on over to Egypt now, another country that had its euphoria, its revolution, and now there's a sense of, I guess, disappointment setting in there as well, Tahrir Square becoming a distant memory. The protesters, it seems, are becoming more and more marginalized, and the regime seems to be becoming a little harder line. Is that judgment a little too harsh?
No, I think it's essentially correct. The real problem in both Egypt and Tunisia is that this transitional process is lasting too long. You have transitional regimes that really do not have the legitimacy to introduce real reform, even if they wanted to. They don't necessarily want, but they don't have the legitimacy to do so. The public is becoming impatient. They want something concrete to happen, but then they are not, but at the same time, they are not willing to give enough support to the transitional regimes so that something can actually happen. So both countries are caught in a vicious circle.
But the protesters themselves, we've been seeing the attempts to return to Tahrir Square. The population itself seems to be losing patience with the protesters.
That's right, because in the Tahrir Square in January and February was the people out there were really representative of all segments of Egyptian society. Now it's a small, hardcore group that it's trying to impose on the transitional regime specific decisions that the rest of the population may or may not agree with.
And we hear more and more Egyptians sometimes saying they should just let the military at least try to get on with the task of trying to rebuild things, trying to pave the way for this transition.
Well, the military really has one task, and that is that of paving the way to the transition, and that's what has to happen now. Unfortunately, they just postponed the elections another time, the parliamentary elections that can restore some legitimacy to the government were scheduled for September, and now it looks they will take place in late November. So that is a very negative development.
So obviously the army, the military is something we'll we'll have to watch in Egypt. Another country which is experiencing, I guess, some difficulties, we can call it that, is Bahrain. Because there's a sense that almost the government has won. It's successfully faced down a lot of the protests from the Shiite majority. Is that your reading of the situation?
No, that's not my reading of the situation, in the sense that there is no doubt that the government has come down very hard on the protest. And particularly with the help of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and some other Gulf countries. But it has not won in the sense that the protest continues. It's no longer mass protest in the downtown area, but it is a lot of ongoing protest with thousands of people day after day in the, let's say, in the suburbs, in the so-called Shia villages, which are really the suburbs of the capital city, and this is not ending, and I don't think it's going to end. That the national dialogue that's taking place at the present time is not convincing the majority of the Shia population.
Do you see, though, the risk down the road, perhaps even in the short term, of greater sectarian divisions, that the government perhaps is working to divide the population there, pit people against one another?
Well, the population has been divided for a long time. The government, keep in mind that this is not the first round of protest in the history of Bahrain. During the 1990s, the country was under state of siege most of the time. And it was the same situation of the Shia population protesting against the monarchy, which is a Sunni monarchy, asking for more power to the parliament, less power for the monarchy. And this is the second round of
It's an ongoing
protest.
An ongoing process.
It's an ongoing process.
We couldn't talk about Bahrain without talking about Saudi Arabia, another, obviously, the largest kingdom in the whole Gulf region there. Saudi Arabia, I guess it's fair to say, has been a brake on reform. It has been essentially trying to stop these revolutions. We remember they sent troops in briefly to Bahrain.
They sent troops to Bahrain, which is not terribly surprising because the Saudis have a small Shia population in the oil-producing areas, and they fear that the unrest will spread to that. But even more importantly, Saudi Arabia is trying to put a brake on protest everywhere. To me, the most interesting thing is that they even expressed a support for the Syrian regime, and yet we know that the king abhors the Syrian regime, but yet the idea of another Arab government being brought down by Shia protest is enough to send the Saudis to convince the Saudis to support this regime.
And this, I imagine, puts the United States in a very awkward position, doesn't it? Because they must be torn between the so-called Saudi ally and the supporting the democratic aspirations in these various countries.
Yes, the United States is in a difficult position. That's why it has not said very much about the repression that's taking place in Bahrain. The United States is trying to patch up its relationship with Saudi Arabia that are, I think, at a low point in the same way they were after 9/11. I think we have gone back to this condition of real strife between the United States and Saudi Arabia. And of course, the United States cannot afford conflict with Saudi Arabia as long as the Western world is as dependent on Saudi oil as it is now.
Now, and speaking of not being able to afford conflict, when we talk about, say, Syria, in that case there, we've had sanctions from the U.S. and Europe. We've had a lot of tough words, Marina, but we really haven't had anything beyond that, any more forceful action. Should the U.S., should Europe do more? Can they do more with regard to Syria?
I don't think either the U.S. or European countries have any intention of mounting a military action as they did in Libya. Libya is already becoming a quagmire, but was relatively simple. Syria has a much stronger army. It's much better trained and equipped. And I think an attempt at a military intervention would be a disaster. It would end up by being an intervention closer to what we have witnessed in Afghanistan than what we are seeing in Libya. So there is not going to be a military intervention.
Briefly, in the little time we have left, Where do you think we're going to see the change come faster, the leaders leave sooner? Syria or Libya? Is Bashar al-Assad going to leave? Is Gaddafi going to leave?
Well, you can toss a coin, I'm not too sure. Syria, Bashar al-Assad will only leave, I think, if the military splits. That is the key issue in Syria. Are we going to see units of the military siding with the protester, as it happened in Egypt, as it happened in Tunisia? So far, it only has happened on a very small scale, and as long as the military holds, we are not going to see the departure of Bashar anytime soon.
In a word, then, you're not optimistic, it sounds like, in the short term at least, for Syria's prospects.
I think it's likely to be months before the situation is resolved. At the same time, I do not think that Bashar al-Assad is ever going to reestablish complete control over the country. I think, in a sense, he has lost the battle, but it's going to last, but he is not going to surrender right away.
Well, we've heard it from Marina Ottaway, a scholar on the Middle East at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, who's our guest today. Thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking about what's very much revolutions in progress and the need to continue the struggle towards reform in those countries. Thanks once again, Marina, for joining us. And thanks to all of you for watching the interview here on France 24.